New York and the Department of Justice are weaponizing the Supreme Court's recent Vanderstok ruling to attack the firearms industry. Brownells, Primary Arms, and 80% Arms, and others are all getting sued by DOJ and New York Attorney General Letitia James, who oddly enough was just referred to DOJ for prosecution herself. Holdovers from the Biden DOJ sure are working tirelessly to continue to restrict the Second Amendment. Today, we're going to take a look at what they're up to. Hi, I'm Ben, and you're watching the Minuteman Moment. But before we get into the video, I just wanted to take a second to let you know about GOA's annual convention, Goals. The Gun Owners Advocacy and Leadership Summit is set to be held August 9th and 10th of this year in Knoxville, Tennessee. Come out and visit with some of your favorite manufacturers, participate in activism training, and hear from the top voices in the Second Amendment community. The best part? It's free for GOA members. So sign up today using the link in the description below. Okay, now back to the video. In July of 2022, New York State filed a lawsuit against a bunch of Second Amendment industry members, namely retailers that sold popular 80% frame and receivers, including big names like Brownells and Primary Arms. New York State alleged that these companies had unlawfully shipped firearms into New York State in violation of state and federal law. To be sure, New York had recently rewritten its state law to reclassify 80% frames and receivers as firearms under state law. But New York claimed that these products were firearms under federal law as well. There's just one problem. ATF's frame or receiver rulemaking, revoking old classifications and reclassifying 80% frames and receivers as firearms, did not become effective until August of 2022. Meanwhile, New York's case involves sales only from June 2016 to July 2022. In other words, the very time period that ATF said that 80% receivers were not firearms under federal law. As the industry defendants put it, this means that New York is seeking to impose massive retroactive civil liability on private parties for conduct that was, at the time, expressly approved by federal regulators. In fact, during the time the complaint covers, ATF had issued numerous letters expressly finding that many 80% products, including polymer 80s, were not firearms under federal law. So regardless of whether New York considered these products to be firearms under its own state law, they were clearly not firearms under federal law during 2016 to 2022. And regardless of whether ATF thinks that these products are now firearms, ATF did not think that from 2016 to 2022. But the district court, an Obama appointee, disagreed, claiming that the products were firearms during the relevant time period, regardless of what the ATF thought. Eager to let the case proceed, he denied a motion to dismiss by the industry. But he did allow the industry defendants to appeal to the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. Now, here's where the DOJ comes in. While the case was in the district court, the Biden administration actually moved to intervene in the case in June of 2023, as if it was a party to New York's lawsuit. The Biden administration styled itself an intervener plaintiff, standing arm in arm alongside New York in its attack on the Second Amendment industry. In fact, it was none other than a New York Attorney General Letitia James who signed the original complaint against the firearms industry. The Biden administration wanted to have its say, and have its say it did. Biden's DOJ argued that the Second Amendment does not protect 80% receivers, that there is no individual right to make one's own firearm, and that the ATF rules amended definition of firearm is appropriate and in accordance with the statute. Now, we'd expect nothing less from Biden's anti-gun DOJ. But fast forward to April 2025. The industry's appeal now has been fully briefed in the Second Circuit and has been assigned to a panel of 3 judges, 2 of whom were appointed by President Trump. And after hearing oral arguments on the industry defendant's appeal, the panel has stayed the case pending the Supreme Court's decision in Vanderstok. But now, on April 9th, 2025, the same Biden DOJ lawyers as before, who are now operating as left-behind guerrilla fighters against AG Bondi and President Trump, have filed a supplemental letter brief in the Second Circuit, claiming that Vanderstok confirms the anti-gun position that DOJ has taken all along. In other words, these Biden holdovers are trying to use the Supreme Court's recent anti-gun ruling retroactively to claim that 80% products were firearms from 2016 to 2022. And they are doing this for the sole purpose of letting the state of New York ravage the firearms industry. Of course, that's not how this works. Federal judges in rogue anti-gun states are not allowed to hold firearms businesses liable for conduct that wasn't unlawful and, in fact, was approved by federal regulators as lawful when it occurred. As noted, the lawyers behind this latest stunt are the same DOJ lawyers who represented the Biden administration when it first intervened in New York's case. Now, they're proceeding under Pam Bondi's DOJ, acting like nothing has changed. But everything has changed. So here are our questions for the Department of Justice. First, why is DOJ arguing that Vanderstok was correctly decided? The Supreme Court's decision was terrible in every way, a horrible misstep, and completely unfaithful to ordinary interpretive principles. Second, why is DOJ rubbing the gun industry's nose in Vanderstok, triumphantly proclaiming that well-respected members of the Second Amendment community should take the fall for selling products that ATF told them were perfectly legal to sell. Third, why hasn't DOJ reconsidered its involvement in this case? Why hasn't DOJ, at a minimum, withdrawn its intervention? Finally, and most obviously, why is the United States still listed as an intervener plaintiff? In other words, why is DOJ litigating against the firearms industry? Someone needs to get control over these rogue Biden holdovers and hold them accountable. Now, thanks for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to stay up to date with GOA's latest fights for your rights.